A nation responded to the attacks of September 11th, 2001 with unprecedented bravery and sacrifice. F-15 pilots from the 102nd Fighter Wing at Otis Air National Guard Base in Falmouth, Massachusetts, scrambled on high alert and launched minutes after the first attack and were sent to Manhattan airspace for combat air patrols. Air Mobility Command launched KC-135 Stratotankers to support the F-15s. By 9 a.m., Andrews Air Force Base readied 3 F-16s fully armed with Sidewinder missiles and now authorized to shoot down civilian aircraft. They reached airspace above the Pentagon 15 minutes after the strike there. At 10:01 a.m., the Command Center in Rome, New York, ordered the 180th Fighter Wing out of Swanton, Ohio, to scramble F-16 fighters. Unlike many other bases, Swanton had no fighters on standby alert status, but managed to put jets in the air 16 minutes later. Air Force One, always ready to fly at a moment's notice, was with the President in Sarasota, Florida. Ordered to protect the President, Air Force One flew to Barksdale Air Force Base with intent to return to Washington, D.C. Instead, it flew to U.S. Strategic Command Center in Offutt, Nebraska, as it was safer and a more secure command center for our President. Operation Noble Eagle began that day to defend the skies of America. By the end of September, Air Mobility Command had 230 missions and delivered 2,200 passengers and 1,500 short tons of cargo. Within minutes of those attacks, fighter aircraft from Air Combat Command under NORAD control were airborne over key cities and kept a near constant sortie pace for almost 6 months. They flew more than 19,000 sorties, and by 2 years after the attack, had racked up more than 34,000 sorties supporting Noble Eagle. Those were not the only heroes in the air that day. Passengers aboard hijacked Flight 93 voted to take the cockpit away from the terrorists. After phoning friends and family, a passenger's voice was heard yelling, "Let's roll." Amid violent maneuvers by the rogue pilots, these heroes were able to thwart another attack of our country's government a mere 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. America truly came together, watching the heroics on the ground in New York City and on the grounds of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. 11,000 ununiformed officers and firefighters, along with 3,300 uniformed EMTs, never sleep together, form New York's bravest and New York's best. New York City has America's largest municipal fire department and the second largest in the world. New York City fire companies and EMS crews were deployed to the World Trade Center minutes after the first aircraft struck the North Tower. A command center was established in the lobby as first responders began climbing the stairs. Mobile command units were established outside the towers and at Greenwich Village. Initial deployments that morning included 200 Fire Department New York units with more than 400 firefighters and EMTs. Despite incredible dangers, first responders continued the arduous task of rescuing. When the towers fell, 343 Fire Department New York firefighters and paramedics who were doing their duty for the people of New York City and America, they lost their lives. Many of the surviving firefighters continued to work, alternating 24-hour shifts as part of rescue and recovery efforts. Similar stories were also happening in Arlington, Virginia, at the site of Pentagon. Arlington firefighters and EMTs, along with service members and civilians on site, began evacuation plans and rescue efforts. Even after evacuation, many hundreds of military and civilian public servants went back into the Pentagon to search for brothers and sisters in service, dead, wounded, or trapped. And throughout America, first response units were mobilizing and headed to New York City and the Pentagon. One of those units came from right here in the Miami Valley. Ohio Task Force 1 was called to activation at 11:30 the morning of September 11, 2001. And by 4:30 that afternoon, they were on their way to Manhattan. Originally known as the Miami Valley Urban Search and Rescue Task Force, the regional team consisted of about 100 firefighters and paramedics from 20 Montgomery and Greene County emergency response agencies, and was specifically trained for urban situations such as collapsed buildings. In 1997, officials from the Federal Emergency Management Agency selected them to be part of a national team of 25 certified urban search and rescue programs. Now part of FEMA, Ohio Task Force 1 grew to 180 members and had 6 months to become fully deployable. The teamwork demonstrated by these responders sealed the deal on this coveted position, but their proximity to Wright Pat helped as well. Wright Pat became their staging ground for equipment and deployment. Aided by the 445th Air Reserve Squadron, Ohio Task Force 1 is provided airlift and logistical support. As Wright Pat deploys its airmen, it only seemed logical that we would also partner in the way with our local community. Wright-Patterson continues as a valuable asset for the task force, supplying a mobilization point and immediate air transportation to anywhere in the country. A mere year after activation as FEMA's Ohio Task Force 1, their elite professionals, training, and equipment would be put to the test at the Ruse grain elevator explosion just outside of Wichita, Kansas, the third largest grain operation in the country. Little did they know how their skills would be needed next. Following the attack on the World Trade Center, our own Ohio Task Force 1 was mobilized within an hour of the second tower's collapse. Well-trained, well-equipped, and ready to serve, these 72 members of Ohio's bravest arrived by dawn in tragedy-stricken Manhattan on September 12th. Little could truly prepare them for the devastation they would witness or the conditions they would endure. Upon arrival, they immediately began working in the Liberty sector of the southwest quadrant of the collapse area. They assisted with confined space void searches, damaged building assessments, searches of surrounding structures, and breaching operations into the underground plaza levels. Day after day, 12 hours at a time, they sifted through tons of rubble looking for potential survivors. The conditions at the site were hazardous at best, as dust and paper particles formed a thick and suffocating fog. As they worked through the night, visibility was extremely limited due to an unrelenting dust in the air which reflected blinding light. Airborne paper particles gradually dissipated as the days continued, but the dust and the smoke from the ever-burning fires remained a constant threat and obstacle in their efforts. With the help of various volunteer supply units, members were provided half-face respirators to help protect them against the dangerous airborne threats. Providing assistance in these heroic efforts were 4 canine teams that trained with the members of Ohio Task Force 1. The canine's sense of smell, 40 times more acute than people, would prove essential in the rescue and recovery efforts. Each team of searchers included a dog, a handler, a medical specialist, structural engineer, and a rescue and technical search specialist. These specialized units inspected outlying buildings, searching for fragments, any traces of human life. Throughout 8 exhausting and gut-wrenching days, the members of Ohio Task Force 1, along with their canine teams and specialized resources, served alongside firefighters, police, medical teams, and other civilian health agencies. They traveled without hesitation to face the unknown, to pick up the pieces, and to hopefully save lives. Indeed, they were among the first responders. The first to put their boots on the ground within hours after the attacks, the first to see the destruction, the first to breathe the dust of a smoldering aftermath. Ladies and gentlemen, your Ohio Task Force 1.